That Selvar Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries. No species had ever dared to challenge them. No army had ever stood against them. Wherever their warships arrived, surrender followed. The supreme warlord, Selkar, stood in the grand war chamber, staring at the holographic projection of his vast empire. Dozens of conquered planets blinked red, a reminder of his people's power. His generals stood beside him, their eyes filled with pride and arrogance. "We have taken the Zurek homeworld in less than 3 days," one of the generals reported. Their armies were crushed, their leaders executed. Resistance was weak, as expected. Zelkar smirked. Another victory. Another species bowing before the Dominion. That Selvar had conquered thousands of worlds in the same way. Their advanced technology, massive fleets, and brutal warriors made them unstoppable. Entire civilizations had fallen before they could even understand the true horror of the Selvar invasion. "Who is next?" Selkar asked, his voice cold and commanding. A younger officer stepped forward, activating a new holographic display. A small blue planet appeared. Earth. The generals murmured among themselves. They had heard the name before, just another primitive world with no real power. "A minor target," one of them scoffed. "Their technology is outdated. They lack unity. Their armies are nothing compared to ours." Zelkar studied the image of the planet, unimpressed. "Have they shown any signs of resistance against our scouts?" The officer hesitated for a moment. "None, Supreme Warlord." But what?" Selkar's voice darkened. "Our spies intercepted a strange transmission from them." The officer pressed a button, and a voice echoed through the war chamber. "If you come here, you will regret it." The room fell silent. The voice was calm, steady, and filled with confidence. The Supreme Warlord narrowed his eyes. "Regret." He let out a deep, guttural laugh. "No species has ever made us regret anything." His generals laughed with him. The idea that a small, unknown species could threaten them was ridiculous. "They are weak," one of the commanders sneered. "They do not understand what they are up against." Zelkar's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Then we will teach them." He turned toward his fleet commander. "Send the invasion fleet. Make it quick. I do not want this to take more than a few days." "Yes, Supreme Warlord." The order was given. The largest fleet in Selvar history was sent toward Earth. To the Selvar, this was just another routine conquest. But they did not know the truth. They did not know that this time they had made a mistake. The Selvar fleet moved through space like a massive black cloud, their warships covering the stars. Hundreds of battleships, cruisers, and carriers approached Earth, their weapons ready to erase another civilization from history. Commander Valkyr sat on the bridge of the flagship Doomfang, watching the blue planet grow larger on the view screen. He had led countless invasions, and this one would be no different. "Scanners, report," he ordered. A technician checked the readings. Minimal space defenses, no planetary shields. Primitive technology. Valkyr smirked. "As expected, we will begin orbital bombardment. Ground forces, prepare for deployment." That Selvar had destroyed countless civilizations this way. Strike fast, wipe out resistance, and crush any survivors. There was never a need for strategy or caution. But something was different this time. "Sir," the technician hesitated, "we are detecting strange activity on the planet's surface." Valkyr turned toward him. "Strange how?" The technician frowned. They are not panicking. No evacuations, no distress signals. They are waiting for us." The bridge fell silent. That was not normal. Usually, the moment that Selvar fleet appeared, entire cities would try to flee. Governments would beg for mercy. But Earth was calm. Valkyr's expression darkened. "Fools. They do not understand what is coming." He turned to his weapons officer. "Fire the first wave. Target their major cities. Let them see what happens when they stand against the Dominion." Missiles and energy beams rained down from the fleet. They moved at impossible speeds, heading straight for Earth's largest cities: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, Tokyo. The generals on that Selvar command ship watched with satisfaction. Another easy victory. But then, something happened. The missiles vanished. The energy beams disappeared mid-flight. Every weapon that Selvar fired never reached the ground. Alarms blared across the fleet. Impossible. Valkyr roared. What happened? Did they deploy shields? The technician's hands shook as he read the data. And no shields detected, Commander. But something interfered with our weapons. It's as if they were erased. Valkyr's jaw clenched. That wasn't possible. No species had ever neutralized Selvar weapons before. Send scouts to the surface, he growled. I want answers. Dropships launched, carrying Selvar warriors to the surface. They expected to land in burning ruins, marching through terrified survivors. Instead, they found untouched cities. No destruction. No fear. And worst of all, no sign of the weapons they had fired. That Selvar had ruled the galaxy for centuries, believing no one could challenge them. But they had just made their first mistake. They assumed humans were weak. And now, they would learn the truth. The Selvar warriors moved cautiously through the streets of New York City. Their black armor gleamed under the bright sun, their weapons ready to fire at any human foolish enough to resist. But as they marched, they noticed something strange. The humans were not running. They were not screaming. They were watching. Men, women, and even children stood on the sidewalks, staring at the invaders with cold, unreadable eyes. Some whispered to each other. Others recorded on their devices. A few even smirked. It was unsettling. Silver Sergeant Cal Tor tightened his grip on his rifle. Commander, there is no resistance. No panic. Valkyr's voice crackled over the communicator. Strange. Do they not understand what is happening? Cal Tor glared at a group of humans watching from a nearby building. They know exactly what is happening. His squad advanced, moving toward Times Square. The towering screens still flickered with human broadcasts. The news showed images of the Selvar fleet in orbit, but no one seemed afraid. A human woman stepped forward, her eyes locked onto Cal Tor. She was unarmed. She did not look weak. Leave, she said simply. Cal Tor sneered. Or what? You think your words can stop us? The woman's expression did not change. Your weapons did not reach us. Your firepower means nothing here. And soon, you will understand why. Cal Tor laughed. You think some trick will save you. He raised his rifle and fired. But nothing happened. His weapon did not respond. The plasma charge inside it vanished. He checked the rifle's power supply. Fully charged. His squad tried to fire as well. Not a single shot was fired. Cal Tor's blood ran cold. What is this? The woman smiled. You came to conquer. But you don't realize. A deep hum filled the air. The Selvar warriors turned as something materialized behind them. Strange, glowing figures that flickered between light and shadow. This planet is different. That Selvar had never encountered anything like it. Their weapons were useless. Their fleet's bombardment had been erased. And now something unnatural was awakening. For the first time in history, the Selvar felt fear. Sergeant Cal Tor felt something he had never experienced before. Powerlessness. The Selvar were warriors, conquerors of 1,000 worlds. They had never faced an enemy they could not destroy. But here, on this strange blue planet, their weapons had failed. Their attacks had disappeared. And now, something else was happening. The glowing figures behind them moved, shifting between light and shadow, their forms unstable yet overwhelming. They were not human. They were not machines. They were something else entirely. Commander, Cal Tor shouted into his communicator. We have encountered an unknown force. Our weapons are static. His communicator was dead. The entire squad's systems shut down at once. Helmets, armor, tracking devices. They were completely blind. Panic spread through the soldiers. "Regroup," Kaltor ordered, "back to the dropships." But when they turned around, the dropships were gone, vanished, as if they had never landed. Kaltor's claws clenched. This was impossible. The human woman was still standing there, her expression calm. "What are you?" Kaltor growled. She took a step forward. The glowing figures seemed to shift around her, watching, waiting. "We are human," she said, "but Earth is something more." The ground beneath them trembled. A deep, rumbling sound echoed through the city. Not an explosion, not machinery, but something ancient, something that had been waiting. Above, in orbit, Commander Valkyr stood frozen on the bridge of the Doomfang. His officers were shouting. Dozens of ships had gone silent. Thousands of Selvar soldiers were simply gone. No wreckage, no distress signals. They had just vanished. Valkyr's cold blood ran colder. This was not war. This was something else. For the first time in his life, that Selvar warlord felt a creeping, suffocating sensation in his chest. Fear. Sergeant Kaltor and his squad moved cautiously through the streets, their instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. Their weapons were useless, their dropships had vanished, and now even the air felt different. The humans remained unshaken. They stood in the streets, watching, waiting, as if they knew what was coming. Kaltor gritted his teeth. He had led invasions on over 100 worlds, faced death without hesitation. But now, for the first time, his claws trembled. "Keep moving," he ordered, his voice low. "We regroup at the nearest command beacon." His soldiers nodded, their usual confidence gone. The city around them was eerily quiet. No alarms, no screams, just the soft whisper of the wind. Then, a sound, a faint whisper in the air. Kaltor spun around. Who said that? No one answered. His soldiers shifted uneasily. "Sergeant, I don't." The soldier vanished. No flash of light, no sound. 1 second he was there. The next, he was gone. Kaltor's breath caught in his throat. "Havoc," he called out. "Where are you?" No response. Then another whisper, and another soldier disappeared. The remaining Selvar warriors panicked. "They're taking us," one shouted. "We need tow." He vanished before he could finish his sentence. Kaltor's heart pounded. He turned to the human woman, still standing nearby. She wasn't running. She wasn't fighting. She was watching. "What are you doing?" Kaltor roared. "What is this?" The woman tilted her head slightly. "This isn't us," she said. "This is Earth." Kaltor's mind struggled to understand. "What do you mean?" The woman took a slow breath. "You came here as hunters. You thought you would conquer us." She glanced at the empty spots where his soldiers had stood. "But you never stopped to ask one thing." Kaltor swallowed hard. "What?" Her eyes locked onto his. "Who is really hunting who?" The ground trembled beneath him. The whispering grew louder. And suddenly, for the first time in his life, Sergeant Kaltor wanted to run. Sergeant Kaltor's instincts screamed at him to flee, but where? His soldiers were disappearing one by one, erased without a trace. Their dropships were gone. Their weapons were useless. He had fought in over 100 wars. He had faced planetary defenses, bioweapons, and even rogue machines. But never this. The human woman remained still, her eyes locked onto him. Around her, those strange glowing figures flickered in and out of existence, watching, waiting. Kaltor took a step back. "You did something to us," he growled. "This is some kind of human trick." The woman sighed. "You still don't understand." The air shifted. The whispering grew louder, turning into an unsettling chorus, like voices speaking just beyond the edge of hearing. And then, the first scream. It came from one of his remaining soldiers. The warrior collapsed, clawing at his helmet, shrieking in pure terror. "It's inside my head," he cried. "It's—" He vanished. The rest of the squad broke. Some ran into the darkness, but Kaltor knew it wouldn't matter. There was nowhere to go. The whispering turned into words. "You are not welcome." Kaltor's breathing was ragged. His claws flexed, desperate to fight. But how could he? What was he even fighting against? Above, in orbit, Commander Valkyr was experiencing his own nightmare. Thousands of Selvar ships had gone silent. His fleet was shrinking, not destroyed, not under attack, just vanishing. Every attempt to contact the ground forces had failed. "This isn't war," Valkyr whispered. "This is something else." A transmission crackled through, one of the last ships still responding. "Commander, we're losing control of the—" Silence. Valkyr clenched his fists. "Pull the fleet back. Now. We're leaving this cursed world." His officers hesitated. "Commander," one said, voice shaking, "what if it doesn't let us go?" Valkyr froze. On the surface, Kaltor was the last one standing. His soldiers were gone. The human woman took a step forward. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't mocking him. She simply looked sad. "You should have left us alone," she said. The whispering grew deafening. Kaltor took a final, desperate step back. And then, darkness. Commander Valkyr stood on the bridge of his warship, his claws gripping the control panel so tightly that the metal bent under his strength. His fleet was vanishing, one ship after another, without explosions, without signals, just erased from existence. Every attempt to communicate with the ground forces had failed. No distress calls, no survivors, nothing. The planet below remained unchanged, silent, unmoved. His officers stood frozen, their faces filled with something that Selvar had never felt before. Fear. Then, a transmission came through. One last, broken signal. "See, Commander, don't come back. Don't." The voice cut off. Valkyr's blood ran cold. Something else appeared on the view screen. A message. Simple. Clear. "Leave." Valkyr didn't hesitate. "Pull back the fleet. Now." The officers scrambled to obey, engaging emergency retreat protocols. Faster than light drives powered up. The remaining ships turned, desperate to escape. As they fled, the planet below remained unchanged. It did not chase them. It did not attack. It simply watched. Back on Earth, the human woman stood in the empty streets, surrounded by the eerie silence left behind. The invaders were gone. A soft wind blew through the ruins. The whispering voices faded. A second figure stepped forward. An older man, his face weathered by time. "Do you think they'll come back?" he asked. The woman shook her head. "Not after what they've seen." The man sighed. "We never wanted this." "No," the woman agreed, "but they forced our hand." She looked up at the sky, where the last of the alien ships had flowed into the void. Earth was never defenseless. It was never weak. And now, the galaxy knew. The deadliest species had met their match. And if they ever returned, humanity would be waiting.